my surprise, this is the first visit to Asia for this series. It's taken us until the 8th episode to finally reach this racing passionate continent. However, we're specifically in Malaysia for the Putrajaya street circuit, which hosted 2 Formula E races from 2014 to 2015. In fact, this track has the distinction of hosting the second ever Formula E race. In terms of the track though, it was designed by Simon Gibbons, which if you watched my episode on the Battersea Park Street track, you may recognise that name. In terms of what he created, well, here's the track layout. The track would end up being 1.59 miles / 2.56 kilometres in length, with 13 corners, 6 to the left and 7 to the right. Although officially, this track would apparently have 12 turns, and then later 14 turns. The track was located near some prominent Putrajaya landmarks, such as the Ministry of Finance and the Seri Warasan Bridge. It seemed like the event was very well planned out. The track was specifically placed in the city thanks to the then Malaysian Prime Minister Najib Razak. He would end up having a simple journey to the circuit. The track was just a few miles away from his office. However, the track wasn't just tailor-made for his ease of travel and the convenience of it. The city had really good hotel and transport links between Putrajaya and another prominent city in Malaysia, Kuala Lumpur, so it was useful for the locals and also any tourists wanting to check out the racing. Anyway, enough about the logistics and the scenery, let's actually talk about the track itself now. If we were to compare this to the other circuit that Simon Gibbons has created, that's been featured in the series, the Battersea Park circuit, I'm glad to say that this is a huge improvement. Firstly, unlike Battersea, this has much more track width to play with. You would more than certainly be able to fit 2 cars side by side comfortably. However, for me, the one thing about this track that is most pleasing is the sheer variety of corner types. Although it's not necessarily the types of corners, but more the technicalities of them and how they are not straightforward for a top quality driver to get speed out of. I have 3 standout corners in particular. Firstly, Turn 7, which was known as Turn 7 because this track didn't have any corner names, which I find slightly disappointing. Either way, the corner itself is a fairly narrow, medium-speed right-hander, which on its own would be a fairly challenging turn. However, you don't approach said corner completely straight, as the tarmac preceding it is curved ever so slightly, meaning you either brake as you turn left for a medium-speed right-hander, which causes the rear to become unsettled, or the drivers have to compromise and go for a slightly safer approach by straightening out the braking zone to negate any rear instability. But it's not the fastest approach, so particularly in qualifying where every inch of track matters, particularly on a street circuit, drivers take the riskier option. Then we have Turn 9 leading into 10, which I will give a name for. I've given it the unofficial title of Irritatingly Irritating Bend. Why is it such an irritatingly irritating irritation? Well, for the drivers, Turn 9 by itself is one where you could take much more speed into than they actually have to. Although that being said, I guess you could go a heck of a lot faster, but then you'd enormously compromise yourself for the corner following it, which is a 180-degree right-hand hairpin, where you barely go above 20 miles an hour through, if that. Also, because Irritatingly Irritating Bend is in principle a fast left-hand corner, it means the car under braking for the right-hand hairpin gets very unsettled, which results in you more than likely having a spin. Then we come to the last corner, which is just a really good corner. It reminds me of a downscaled version of the first corner at Sebring, just going right rather than left. There's lots of road to play with, it's very bumpy, and it's one of the fastest corners on the track. As far as the rest of the circuit goes, it's not too bad. Perhaps the first chicane is unnecessarily tighter than it could be. However, for me, the hairpin is the only real bad point on this track. Yes, it helps give the Irritatingly Irritating Bend an extra devilish challenge, but on its own, it just doesn't fit in with the rest of the track at all. It almost feels like an afterthought. It stands out like a nettle in a bed of roses. Now, a good track for hot lapping doesn't necessarily guarantee that a track is good for racing. I'm glad to say that this track could have produced that. Now, I say could have instead of did or didn't, because whilst this track showed glimpses of good wheel-to-wheel racing, the races were littered with incidents and accidents as a result of car-to-car contact. However, this circuit had enough width on it to make good racing more than plausible. Take this really nice cutback move by Sam Bird on Oriol Servia as an example. Although that being said, the races were entertaining in their own rather unique way. But after 2015, the streets of Putrajaya didn't host another Formula E race event. The reason why? Well, I can't find an official reason anywhere as to why it didn't return. I can though maybe take a guess as to why. If you look at the grandstands, some of them were pretty empty, which, considering there weren't that many grandstand seats in the first place, that's not a promising sign. In fact, I wonder if the city knew they were going to be off the calendar for the 2015-16 season before the second race was even held. This is a still frame from the start of the 2014 race. Look at the general infrastructure, the grandstand on the right and the pit facilities on the left. Now let's compare this to the 2015 event. As you can see, the grandstand is now no longer covered over, and in turn looks a bit smaller than 2014, whilst the pit building on the left is much smaller than before and is now in the form of much easier to disassemble tents, rather than the previous glass building with proper pit garages built into them. So my guess is that the event ended due to low attendance. However, I can't find any official reason as to why it did end. However, the fact that it did end is a real shame in my opinion. A pretty good street track for racing, a tricky circuit to get right on the limit, and in an unusual and lesser known location which could have helped give the city greater global recognition. That though is going to be it for this video. Thank you very much for watching. What did you think about this track? Do you think it should have been given more time? Or was it too overly irritating to warrant coming back? Say what you think in the comment section, along with any other street tracks you'd like to see featured in this series. However, until the next video, enjoy the rest of your day.